start off with just kind of who the heck you are. Obviously we know you as Flor Serna, Executive Director of the Electric Girls, who's also the #1 Gigsy client, I think is the...
Yep, that's who I am.
The #1 Gigsy client has been the tagline for all things.
Mm-hmm.
So who are you?
I'm the #1 Gigsy client, Electric Girls, Flor. It's what I do. Yeah, that's who I am.
Did I miss anything?
There's a lot more to
Where
who
do we
I
start?
am.
Where do we start?
Well, I was born on October 22nd, 1992.
Great.
In Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was a Tuesday. It was around 11:45 a.m. A.m.
I was born 11:50 something p.m.
Interesting.
And my mom wanted to give birth to me before midnight so that my bris would be on a Sunday so that family could actually come.
Uh-huh.
And she didn't want to miss Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did she miss it?
No,
You made it?
I did.
Wow.
We've been celebrating ever since.
Nice.
Every year.
So that's how I started. And I grew up, and I'm still growing.
Did you grew up in New Mexico?
I did. In Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it. I miss it. New Mexico is wonderful.
Are you a New Orleanian now? Because you've been here for 7 years? 6, 7 years?
7 years-ish. Am I a New Orleanian now? I think it depends on who you ask.
That's always true.
That's very true. Some people are like, no, never. So if some people say no, never, then I'll say no, never. I'm a transplant.
Yeah. Do you feel wedded and committed to the city because you did your undergrad, as I understand,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, has Electric Girls been sort of the biggest thing that you've done post-grad?
Yeah, it's been one of the only things I've really done post-grad that's at least connected to this city. I had other jobs as well in addition to Electric Girls, but definitely Electric Girls, I think, solidified my connection to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
For now, Electric Girls is based in New Orleans, and, we may branch out to other areas of Louisiana or the U.S. at some point.
Very cool.
But it has definitely grounded me here. So, yes, I'm very committed to the city, and, definitely more personally, politically, all of that attached to the state of Louisiana than I am to New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
However, I very much miss the desert.
The desert.
Yes.
We're not getting a whole lot of desert in New Orleans.
No, we're not.
It's a totally different animal. It's this sort of Southwest upbringing. Do you have? Would you ever expand the organization there? Because I think.
Yes.
As I've seen Electric Girls, it's expanded really impressively over the last 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm.
What are the next steps for it? I guess could you tell us a little bit about kind of what it is and kind of where it's going?
Sure. So Electric Girls is a nonprofit organization currently based in New Orleans. And we create learning spaces where girls can learn with and from each other, specifically in skills that they might not normally be attracted to. So that's, building with circuitry, learning how to program using a computer, learning how to use power tools, and kind of figuring out ways to navigate all of those things to where they can create and design their own self-directed projects. So they get to use those skills to create their own, inventions, or really, I guess, see their own ideas come to fruition in that structure. So at a high level, that's what Electric Girls is. And in New Orleans specifically, we have occupied space in after-school spaces, in school, weekends, and summer camp is probably our largest set of programs. So what's next for Electric Girls? A lot of what we do is not necessarily proprietary at all. But I think that we do have a strength in how we have thought about creating those spaces and environments that other people are not capitalizing on.
Sure.
And so that's other people, meaning just schools, might just not have the structure to like teach a group of girls only how to build using a wood saw, right? That's like logistically very hard. But the way that we have created Electric Girls allows for that. So I think there is definitely interest in that type of structure all over the place, all over the U.S. at least. And
what's an example of how you might differentiate?
Electric Girls?
As I understand it, and as I've heard you kind of talk about it before, the way that you articulate the value of this sort of space making like you're talking about is that you've become experts in introducing concepts in ways that are both like the concept or the skill itself isn't often introduced to young women as a thing that they can participate in. And it's often not taught in a way that may be sensitive to the way that young women want to engage with that kind of material. Yeah.
I mean, I'd say probably 75% of the battle is creating a space that's all girls.
What does that mean?
It means no boys allowed. It means that often when you have co-ed learning environments, and specifically when you're dealing with something that there may already be some gender bias attached to, which unfortunately there is in this world we live in, it's going to be a lot harder for girls to recognize their own skills if they feel intimidated in a space where they believe that, a boy in their class might be better than them.
Sure.
They might already say, okay, that's not for me. Moving on, I'll go back to what I know I'm good at, which might be something else.
I see.
So what I'm saying is part of why it works is because we're adamant about creating those spaces as girls only. And that really takes you like pretty far because girls are willing to participate, they're willing to be more active, they're willing to, they just don't feel as intimidated in that environment.
The last year that I was teaching in the city, up until that point, I had always taught gender integrated classes. It was freshman year English classes and some junior sort of remediation courses. The last year, the school made a shift where they went to a gender segregated freshman academy. And it was crazy because exactly what you're talking about, the change in dynamics that happen from mixing and matching young women and young men together, it's really, really interesting. I'll give you the case, you take a bunch of young guys and you get them in a room and you're working on a project and people are kind of going about and there's a kind of goofiness that a freshman boy is always going to have of like being ridiculous. But even if a young woman walks in just to drop off a pass from like the other side, all of a sudden all the guys kind of just like they start posturing, they start goofing off, they start messing with each other in different ways. How do you talk about that, the importance of those kinds of environments? Are people sympathetic to that? Is there a pushback? How do you navigate it?
How do I talk about it to adults or the girls?
To both, I guess.
Don't talk about it to the girls, really. I find that when it actually comes down to it and they're participating in the program, they just want to build cool stuff.
Yeah.
They don't care about the reason why Electric Girls exists and blah, blah, blah. Like, of course, that sometimes comes up and we address it with them. But it's not at all part of our message to them. For the girls, for like school partners or I guess other external stakeholders, there's occasionally logistical pushback. However, anyone who is saying, we would like to host an Electric Girls program at our school or our group or whatever, already knows the value of having that space. And so they have created the structural environment for it to happen. So sometimes it's like, oh, it's hard for us to like find somewhere for our brothers of these sisters to go at this time. And what do we do? But usually we figure something out.
People tend to get it.
Yes.
They go, yeah, we understand the value of it.
Yes.
So 70% of it, you said, is making the space. And you said 30% as what is the other 30%?
How we interact with the girls. So our instructors, and this is more around like the environment that we create and is around like the mindsets that the girls should feel and should be exercising when they're in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they sit down, get fed a bunch of knowledge from electric girls about STEM and blah, 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 and then they're able to do cool stuff. It's
Sure.
really like, here's this space, here's some basics, now use what you've learned to explore. It's not going to be easy. Your circuit will break, you will be frustrated, but you have to find a way to make it work. And so that's part of like the environment that we create that works well for girls to learn because they have a good space and good support to be facilitated through the process, but also to fail and to then succeed.
Is that a lot of the secondary effects? The secondary teaching is like dealing with failure, feeling like you're not supported, but then being in this environment that is really supportive? Like, do you notice that emerging over the course of a summer camp or a pop-up or something like this?
Do I notice what?
That there's like a shift in the way that they address the material because of the environment you build?
It's hard to say because often I don't have anything to compare it against. So the girls that we see in a primarily extracurricular experience, like I don't know what they're like during the school day. And I don't know what their school environment is. I mean,
Sure.
we have the whole spectrum of schools in New Orleans, you know. So the structure is totally different. I'm not really sure. I can't measure any change from their behavior
Sure.
in that way. Yeah.
That's not quite the point, is it? It's more about sort of curating access from what it sounds like.
Yes.
How did you get into this? What is it that where does the idea even come from? I guess we should go back
Sure.
to that even too, because what you're describing is a pretty expansive program that's touching pop-ups, multiple schools across the city, summer camps.
Yep.
What's the nucleus of it?
So it all started back in New Mexico.
Back in New Mexico. What was the date?
Not sure what the date was. I'd say it kind of cultivated over time. But I grew up playing music. I played piano and I taught myself how to play guitar, and I was in drumline and I played tuba, and I was like, wow, I love playing all these instruments in a sort of mediocre way. And I was really interested in learning how to record all of them at once, of myself playing all these instruments.
Record them all at once?
Yeah. Well,
like
not playing at once,
but...
but...
Stevens or an Andrew Bird, like...
I'm not as skilled as those men are.
But the idea.
The point is, I wanted to figure out how to do multi-track recording.
Cool.
And
where did that come from?
Where did what come from?
Multi-track, that's a weird jump from... No, I don't know anybody
That's not a weird jump.
I like the tuba, I like the piano. I need a couple of grand of equipment so that I can run all these simultaneously.
I never said I need a couple grand of equipment.
Or whatever.
Jumped in the gun.
How did you get started?
I wanted to be able to have a recording of myself playing all of those instruments together. So I found some really wacky way of using a really cheap digital camera to record video of me playing the instruments in my room, and then rip the audio and layer tracks in Windows Movie Maker. You guys would love this. It's so fun. And create this really messy, noisy track of me playing all these instruments. And I was like, yeah, I did it. And it was so messy, but it was so fun. Yeah. I still have lots of those recordings. I'll show you.
The original one, though.
Yes, the original ones. And there's some video, too, because I could still, cut some video and... But anyway, it was a whole mess.
But you were playing. You were learning the technology.
Yes.
You were mixing and matching.
Mm-hmm. And then I decided I wanted to do it for real. So I got an internship in high school at a recording studio in New Mexico, and I loved it. And they were so kind and supportive to me. Manny Rettinger was the recording engineer there. We're still good friends. And he supported me a lot and gave me some basic recording equipment. So I just loved it, was more and more interested in it, and ended up getting a scholarship to go to Loyola, which was a school I was very interested in because they had a professional recording studio and a program that I could use to be in the recording studio as much as possible.
Cool.
Moved to New Orleans to go to Loyola. Realized I really didn't like the music industry program that I was enrolled in there because it was so business focused and business is so boring. And so I asked them if I could transfer, and they were like, don't transfer. And so I figured out a way to create a contract degree. The contract degree is basically you make your own degree, sort of. They made it sound way easier than it is because it actually involves quite a bit of like accreditation and proving all these classes. And I ended up doing way more credit hours than I would have if I just kept my mouth shut. But I basically created a major that had me in the recording studio a lot. Took all of the computer science classes and then took a lot of computer music classes. So that was a lot of, I had a lot of independent studies with professors, which was cool because it was things, that's the thing, is like I saw in Loyola all these resources, but they weren't being allocated in a way that provided this sort of program that I really wanted.
Sure.
Which was like, professors who had significant expertise in computer programming and like the software behind recording music.
Okay.
But they just had that knowledge and there was not like a formal class for it. So I kind of had independent studies with them where I learned all of that stuff. And anyway, it was a whole lot of fun. And
does it have a name and does it still exist?
It does still exist, I think, as a track, like an offshoot off of the music industries program, because some classes are still the same. But it is music technology.
Music technology.
Mm-hmm.
Created by you.
Yeah, created by me.
That's very cool.
Sort of. So, did that, and I worked in Loyola's recording studio still as an engineer, recording Loyola people, also external people. That was a lot of fun. And just generally realized that there were no other women in my spaces.
Sure.
No other women in recording, no other women in the computer sciences, and that was lame. So I was also just kind of like wondering why that was the case.
Yeah.
I know this is a long-winded story, but we're getting there. So
it's a great story.
My senior year of college, I was in the honors program, and you have to write a thesis paper about anything you want. And you spend the last like year and a half of college writing a research paper.
Sure.
But they let you decide whatever it is. And so I decided that that's what I wanted to research, was why women don't go into audio engineering. And as I was like researching, I realized, first of all, there's not like a ton of data specific to audio engineering that is like published that I can sort of research and write about. But second, that I was realizing there's a ton of data about like general why women don't pursue computing or engineering. So not necessarily specific to audio, but in general. And that fascinated me, and I did more research and learned that young girls actually were already deciding in elementary school or, you know, early middle school that it was something that they weren't good at, that they were vocalizing that they believe that girls are generally worse than boys at math and at science, and that they don't see themselves as being capable of being an engineer when they grow up. So I think all of those things like pissed me off enough to where I was like, hold on, who's solving this problem? And so then my thesis sort of transitioned into like program design that people have created that solves that issue. And learned about some really great programs all around the US and like general structures that have been proven to work really well for that, including gender segregated classrooms, and project-based learning. And then I did some research on like what exists here in New Orleans, couldn't find anything. And I started to believe that there was probably a way that I could do it and have it be a little bit specific to what I know, which is like some hobby electronic stuff I have fun with, but also audio. There's some really fun things to do with audio as it relates to electronics, but also computer programming. And asked my thesis advisor at Loyola if I could finish the paper, leave it where it's at, not continue writing a big paper, but instead develop a program to try and solve the problem that I had done some preliminary research on.
I see.
And then use that program and like pilot it in schools in New Orleans and collect data based on whether or not it was successful. And they said yes.
There was almost no research?
There was research. There's tons of research, but it was like I was still doing something that was different. I mean, there's like very general research of like, we're going to have a girls' STEM group. That doesn't really tell you like what they actually did,
sure.
right? And so they said yes to that, which I'm infinitely grateful for because their flexibility and belief in me allowed me to have a full-time job where I'm my own boss 3 years later. And that's cool. So I did that and I got some tiny grant money from Loyola, actually. They had a couple awards that I applied for, and we got $1,500, which bought our first round of materials and equipment that I took into schools, and just learned that there was demand indeed from the girls, from the school, from the teachers, from the parents, and it sort of grew from there. And I think I was a little bit naive, which is good, and definitely kind of ignorant of the like summer camp structure of New Orleans and what sort of programs already existed, what the market was like. Those things were all stuff that I had to learn after I kind of got into it. But after that last semester, I graduated, and then we piloted our first summer camp that summer, and we had a total of, I think, 25 girls across like 3 or 4 different summer camp sessions. So it was a very small summer camp, like 6 to 10 girls at a time. And yeah, that's the Electric Girls starting story.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, how long did that take?
Well, it took 3-4 years.
Yeah.
It was right out
3-4 years and 15 minutes to explain.
It was the creation of... I think it's a great story because it ties together so many elements of the things that you were looking for when you were a little kid, where you wound up when you were pursuing the thing that you like to do, and then you're kind of looking around like where is everybody else? And then taking that sort of research orientation to it and going, well, why does this exist? What can I do about it? It's kind of what everyone wants their education to serve, right? To serve some actual result or some creation, right? What did you find, to go back to the research part, what were you finding about why young women, why girls are not, and because it's striking at how young of an age you identified that young women are kind of opting out. Where does that come from?
Bias. Lack of representation of women in those fields, like at an adult level. Implicit bias from teachers, and different learning differences between boys and girls. So one of the most fascinating examples to me was actually, like, first of all, there's just a fact that boys and girls learn differently. They approach problems differently. That's why we need diversity to be able to solve problems more effectively.
Sure.
So, unfortunately, the way that a lot of classrooms are set up tend to benefit the majority, or they're designed to benefit a certain group of people and not another group of people. So, in a classroom, you know, if you have a very hands-on problem or something that might seem intimidating at first, there are certain types of problems or projects where, because of just inherent neurological learning differences, boys will tend to jump right in, try to solve a problem, and just become more active in the process, where girls can be, at first, a little bit more introspective, thinking, gathering information before acting. Now, the problem is that teachers often can socially reward boys for jumping in and participating, and it's like,
taking initiative.
Go, Nathan, you're doing it. Like, so proud of you for, taking initiative in this problem. And girls hear that in the room and they think immediately, well, I am not being socially rewarded in this setting, and it must be because I'm just not doing as well.
I'm not fast enough. I didn't jump on it well
and
enough.
How come I didn't understand it right away? And the truth is, they didn't understand it. They're just acting because there's just a difference there.
Sure. That's super fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go in and you start looking at the way classrooms are operating and the way that you design a program, looking back at it now, how do you spread the expertise that you have back into the classroom?
I'm not sure what you mean.
So how do you bring that learning and the sort of gift of understanding what that electric girl space, the power of that space is? Is there a way to offer that value to sort of a general ed classroom that might be socially reinforcing men and women differently, and then creating biases, creating these sort of pretenses?
I'd say there probably is a way, but that's not what we're focused on.
Mm-hmm.
We're not here to reform the classroom. We're here to reform the way that girls think about themselves.
I see. So where does it expand to? You've got now, how many different types of programs do you have that could be running at any point in time?
Well, we have summer camps. We have programs that happen on the weekends. We have after-school programs. Then we have sort of one-day workshop type things.
Mm-hmm.
And those are often in partnership with another organization. So the Girl Scouts is having a really large event this fall, and we'll be there all day doing different types of Electric Girls activities. And then we have some in-school programs, and those are a little bit more tailored, take a lot of time to prepare, are a little bit more purposeful in their design.
Is that during the course of the actual academic day?
Yes, it'll have a place during the academic school day.
That's super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that gets a school interested or involved in that?
Their interest in our ability to execute project-based learning. Our instructors hold a certain skill set that maybe their teachers don't, or their teachers don't have the ability to just learn it in their infinite free time. But we can come in and sort of at the same time execute a program and train their teachers on how to do it.
Wow.
That's the idea. So what was the question?
I think you answered it.
Cool.
And it's really done with the sensitivity of both the training and the implementation piece, and that's what gets them into it.
Yeah.
How big is this team? So this sounds like a lot to manage. And just having seen some of the Electric Girls camps personally, I know that there's just tens and tens and tens of girls. It's not these 6 girls from that camp anymore. It's hundreds and hundreds of girls at this point.
Yes.
What does your team look like? I mean, you're not. First off, you're figuring this all out as you go, and I mean, as all entrepreneurs do. And now you've grown it to a point where it's serving hundreds of young women in the city. How have you expanded to where it is now? It's a team of how many folks, and how do they work?
Mm-hmm. So I am a full-time employee. I am executive director. We, at the end of May, were so fortunate enough to have hired a full-time program director, Sia, who is an incredible human. So we have 2 full-time employees. That's it. On the part-time side, we have probably, I want to say 8 to 10-ish part-time people who are largely instructors but can sometimes take on other roles, who work during the school year, either in the in-school time frame or after school or on weekends. And they're really the ones delivering and executing with the girls.
Sure.
So Small team, lots of volunteers. We get it done.
And then how many folks are you serving over the course of like a calendar year?
It's hard to answer super accurately as we grow.
Sure.
But right now that number is about 700-800 a year.
Which is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you consider like a staff of, or team of around about like 10 plus volunteers, that's like 70 something per person. That's huge.
Yeah.
Is that daunting?
A lot of different things are daunting. The numbers by itself are not. Thinking about making enough money to pay everybody is daunting.
Sure.
Yep.
How do you deal with those pressures? Just as somebody who's growing something that has got a lot of excitement around it in the city. Folks love the programming. Parents love sending their young girls to the programming. Your volunteers are obsessed with doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Your staff is super, super oriented around the mission and super passionate about what you do.
Mm-hmm. So how do I deal with the issues of payroll? Is that what you're asking?
How have you been learning so far? Because you're still pretty young as far as executive directors go.
Mm-hmm.
You're still learning and you're doing really, really an incredible job.
Yeah, thanks. I think that every day is a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have gone through years and years of different types of self-doubt, and I not always, but most of the time I land on that it's okay, that these things are, still being worked on. I think that I am equipped to lead Electric Girls for now. I don't think that will be true forever.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's still a lot of stuff that we got to figure out structurally, especially on the business side of things, but we're getting there. So, yeah, every day is a learning experience.
What do you think are some of the lessons that you've gotten in the last 3 years?
What are some of the lessons? That you should not always trust other people to do it for you. I had so many opportunities where I've been afraid of this form I have to fill out, so I hire a lawyer, and then oops, the lawyer did it wrong. I should have just read the form and done it myself, because it would have cost a lot less financially, but also a lot less in terms of risk. We have to submit these forms to the state or to the government, the IRS, and I should have just trusted myself a little bit more,
sure.
I think, and been less apprehensive. That's a big lesson. That applies across the board. And I think I've learned that just building a solid team is super important. Yeah.
What kind of resources do you use to do that?
To what?
To
build a team?
To keep your own personal headspace kind of where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's super hard. I mean, you're just out of college. You're running this organization that is the natural extension of the work that you were doing in undergrad. It starts taking off. It's growing. You're growing it. Now it's a thing. Now it has employees. Now it's serving 700 people. I don't imagine that there are a lot of folks who you graduated with who are necessarily at that point in their career. What sort of resources do you have around you that are able to keep the confidence high and keep you balanced?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a lot of luck that landed me here where I am. The stars kind of aligned and made it happen. So I don't think that there's value to measuring myself against other people my age or who graduated in the same time-ish as me, because
an empathic connection, right? Somebody who could understand oh crap, I just submitted the wrong document to the IRS
Yeah.
for my nonprofit
I mean, I think I
audit.
used to be a little bit more frustrated with that before. I was like, nobody understands me. But now I realize that like everybody has very high stress moments in whatever they do, whether it's work or just life, and it's just different for everyone all the time. But probably my best resource, honestly, is people like other executive directors who definitely get it. Other people who work in small organizations who definitely get it. Those are amazing resources to me. My cat is another great resource. I go home and he's always there, and he loves me and I love him.
That's it. That's balance.
Yeah, that's how I stay balanced. I like to figure out when I'm working and when I'm not and strengthen those boundaries. That's been very helpful for me.
Are you pretty good at drawing those lines?
No, but I'm getting better.
That's been super tough.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
But I'm getting better. Yeah.
It's the life stuff. You got to figure it out.
Yep.
It's so interesting hearing the way that you talk about the organization.
Why?
Because it's not from, like, you're definitely really proud of what you're doing and you're proud of the thing that you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that you talk about it is just from a place of a sort of factual, it's just sort of obvious. It's like, yeah, so look, we're going to do this thing and we're going to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not from a place of like egocentrism, where you hear sometimes folks really want to say, oh, this is my idea. Like, make sure my name is in the byline. Make sure that, like, I'm in front of this thing. Like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, legally, factually, Electric Girls is not mine.
Yeah.
I could be getting fired right now via email if that's what's happening. Because I'm an employee of Electric Girls, right? Whereas like a for-profit business, somebody owns it. Electric Girls does not have an owner. So yes, I am a very like logical, legalist person sometimes. So those are the facts. Like, I don't own Electric Girls, which is cool. I like it. It actually helps a lot because it helps my like mental state a lot, because I think a lot about my successor, because I believe in Electric Girls. Electric Girls, I think, has the potential to continue to exist and grow for a while, past a point where I would want to continue to be employed by Electric Girls, probably. So I think about whoever is going to step in as executive director after me. I have to create a really nice scenario for them, right? I have to like get my file structure organized. I have to make sure that they have staff who are really committed to the organization, have to institutionalize everything, because Electric Girls is something that's way bigger than, me. It's not like my little pet project at all.
Sure.
It's been built over time by a ton of people. It might have been me like working really long nights for the first like 2.5 years to like kickstart a lot of it, but that doesn't give me any more ownership than anybody else. So there's that. And I think if I felt more ownership of Electric Girls, I think it's kind of like emotionally dangerous, because I don't want my identity to be tied to it all the time.
Sure.
Like, I think my identity can be tied to having started it and having been there in the beginning stages. But, if some law was passed tomorrow that bans single-sex learning environments and Electric Girls has no choice but to just, like, shut down, that's out of my control, and I'm not going to feel like it was my personal failure, right? That's the failure of the government if they do that.
Sure.
But I appreciate that there's some distance, and I think about Electric Girls as a totally separate entity that I have to serve and work for, rather than being tied to me.
That's insanely mature.
It's just nonprofit law.
it's seeing so many people who are starting organizations and just knowing, having started Gigsy years ago at this point in time, something that bears absolutely no resemblance to what it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the exact pipeline that I guess the way that I experienced it was that like you can either continue to think that you doing things or being in a particular role is important, at which point in time you then become the thing that holds back the ability of the organization to succeed,
mm-hmm.
or you recognize that you have to put yourself in the position to be of service to the organization, which means that you have to constantly move into the place where you are most valuable.
Yes.
As opposed to necessarily the place that you would be based on right or precedent or any other form like that.
Definitely. I
but
think
it's
like
definitely a stretch of the ego of you looking at this thing and feeling like, well, I thought it was mine, but then it becomes an organization can't grow if it's just yours. It has to be everyone else's. Everyone has to jump on board and be interested and invested in it for it to be something. You have to let it go.
Yes, definitely. I believe that founder syndrome is alive and real in this world. And it's exactly what you just said, which is like someone who is a founder and can develop ego and control can sometimes destroy a company, sometimes just prevent it from thriving. And I'm mindful of that, but also mindful that it might not be, it's definitely not the time for me to exit the organization just because I'm the one who founded it, right? That's kind of like backwards logic. But for some people, they get themselves in a situation where that does have to happen. Like someone has exerted so much control over the organization over whatever span of time that like you gotta get out.
So you're setting up for a sustainable business, a sustainable organization.
Mm-hmm.
You have the maturity to know what's important in creating and curating a team,
Mm-hmm.
having it be the kind of place where people want to work.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have how do you want to continue to contribute in the next couple of years? Like where does Flor go next?
I think I need to continue to institutionalize everything. So like the things that we have down that we know work really well need to be recorded in ways that they can be very easily replicated, so that we aren't dependent on people or individuals, right? Myself or others. Yeah.
So what would you consult? Would you go?
Oh, you mean what am I gonna do as a human after Electric Girls?
Or is that too far down the horizon?
Build my own house in the desert and live off the land. Peace, y'all.
You're out.
I'm out.
Tell me about the house.
I'm saving up for it. Right now I have, I think, $31 saved for the house I'm gonna build.
It's a good start.
It's not nothing.
Real estate is cheap in the desert though too.
There's that. And it's gonna have a lot of plants in it and my kitties. And yeah.
Do you have plans for it yet? Like, have you drawn it out?
No.
Is there a particular place that you're hoping to put it?
I don't know yet. I want to say New Mexico, but it could be elsewhere. Kind of waiting to see like what direction climate change takes us in and figure out what my best bet is as far as, surviving.
But you'll be out there in the desert in a sustainable home.
That's the plan.
Have you heard of these things called earth ships?
Yes.
Would it be an earth ship?
Yes. It's an earth ship.
Okay. So could you describe an earth ship just for folks who might not know? Because this is...
Sure, I'm
I only learned about them about
earth
a year
ship
ago.
expert, y'all. Please. But I did stay in an earth ship once.
Holy smokes.
And it was an inspiring experience. I think it's essentially just a no or very low impact housing situation. So water comes from the rain, electricity comes from the sun. Yeah, you reuse your water.
And you garden too, right?
Yeah, you garden, you compost your waste, your human waste, and yeah. So it has there's a lot more about like the actual structure of the house and how to design it so that it, preserves the air, whether it needs to be hot or cold, and materials, all that type of stuff.
So you make sustainable organizations, you make sustainable housing.
Yeah.
Everything you touch turns to sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic, Flor.
Thanks.
We're coming on 45. We just cracked the 45 limit.
Cool. We talked about some interesting stuff.
We got all the things. I'm feeling pretty good.
Strange directions, but it's okay.
We appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for coming on and schmoozing with us.
How did I do?
I think you rocked it.
Yeah?
I learned a lot about you that I didn't know.
Really?
The origin story was great. Just getting all the different angles of Electric Girls. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest thing is that it's very seeing Electric Girls on the surface, it's easy to not assume that you just don't know where it comes from. And then hearing you articulate like the origin story and the basis for the necessity of it is so clear, so multifaceted in where it comes from. It comes from a multitude of personal experiences. It comes from the research that you were doing. It comes from the application of that research. It speaks to like all these very interesting skill sets that you have that I definitely didn't know about. And just as somebody who's like who biases more extroverted, like see the world through the extroversion lens. Mm-hmm. So to get to slow down and just kind of be like, tell me some things. It's great to be able to hear you break down and really describe all these little things that I probably would have otherwise just missed or not caught in the backstory of, or had not been able to draw the connections.
Yeah. Interesting. That's cool.
It is very cool.
I'm glad that it worked out.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Episode 3.
Peace.
You rocked it.